There's nothing like getting off that plane and that blast of humid after you've been in Connecticut, in New York, in New Hampshire, in Boston, and it just felt right to be back and to be with all of you and the folks who really made what we were all a part of in 2017 and 2018 possible, starting with the most important person in this community during the campaign from the very outset, who's my connection to almost every other person in this room, Seema Lajavari. We've all learned better than to ever get in Seema's way or say no to anything that she asks of us. And she, when I first met her in 2017, when really almost no one outside of El Paso knew anything about me or knew my name, she really took a huge chance on me and believed in me. And I can't tell you how encouraging that was at that moment, where there had to have been a little bit of uncertainty about what in the world were we doing in the state of Texas, taking on Ted Cruz, a state that had not elected a Democrat to the United States Senate since 1988. And this guy from El Paso thinks he's going to do it, and for some reason, Seema, you thought that made a ton of sense. So, a belated Happy Mother's Day to all the moms in the room. I got to spend at least part of Mother's Day with Amy in Logan Airport. We had just been on the road for a few days together. It was in fact the first part of the campaign over the last 8 weeks that she's been able to be a part of with me physically there, meeting the people that I'm meeting, hearing the stories I'm hearing, and it just is incredibly energizing and a constant reminder of why we're doing this. So I was so happy that she was there, but I was just talking to Lynn. Where is Lynn? And we were trying to remember what we were doing a year ago, Mother's Day. And we were with Lynn in Paducah, Texas, on the courthouse steps with 24 red roses to hand out to the moms who had shown up. All 13 of them, total, maybe a little more. And then about 4 protesters who came as well. Which was, it actually turned out to be this great event because befitting the style of this grassroots campaign where we wanted to bring everybody in. We counted nobody off. No one's taken for granted. We're not going to write you off based on who you voted for last time, where you live in the state, the party you belong to. None of that matters to us. And we gave those protesters the first questions. We said, you don't have to protest us. Come on in. Ask a critical question. Tell me something I don't know. Guide us in a better direction if you don't like what we're doing. And it really made me feel really good that day, that there's a way that we can be civil and kind and decent and dignified with one another, even when we disagree, sometimes passionately so. And I think that so distinguished the campaign that we all got to run together. A grassroots campaign, all people, no PACs, and we never ran against anyone or anything. We ran for this country with one another, and it was just the most powerful, most beautiful feeling. And I've got to tell you, traveling these last 8 weeks over the span of 15 states, having held 150 town hall meetings in that time, it's very much like the Texas campaign in the respect that we're learning from people where they are. We're going to communities, no matter how rural or how red or how big or how blue. We're going to make sure that everyone knows that they count because we're going to listen to them and bring them in to the conversation. And it was so special this weekend for Amy to be part of that. And there was this one moment where there was a break in the just constant rain that we had been seeing on the road in New Hampshire, and the sky opened up, the sun was shining, and we found ourselves in Exeter, this incredibly historic community in New Hampshire, and we're in a park outside, not too far from the old town hall, where on July 16th, 1776, they read a copy of the Declaration of Independence to all the citizens who had gathered around. And it was a great reminder of just how we got started on this experiment, that unlike almost every other nation on the face of the planet, We chose not to define ourselves by race or ethnicity or common ancestry or genealogy, but just this idea that we are all created equal, with the implication that there should be equal opportunity and the chance for us to reveal our genius here, regardless of the differences between us. And that town hall, the 250, 300 folks who came out, just felt like magic. You knew you were doing the right thing at the right time with the people who are going to decide not just who the nominee is going to be, but the future and fate of this country at this defining moment of truth. And the things that came up at that meeting and along the way are many of the same issues that have come up here. We were at another town hall in New Hampshire. It was on a Friday, and a student took the day off from Derry High School, the largest high school in the state of New Hampshire. And you and I were talking about this earlier, and I was talking about gun violence. And we were both in awe of this young man, Kendrick Castillo, who sacrificed his life in a school just outside of Denver last week. As a gunman opened fire, he didn't run away, he ran towards the shooter in order to save his fellow students' lives. And he did, and it's reminiscent of this young man, Riley Howell, who did something very similar at UNC Charlotte the week before. And she says, you know, that really resonates with me, because every single week in our school, we have an active shooter drill. And each child in the classroom, to a person, knows exactly what they're going to do. The bookshelf that they're going to pull down to try to bar the entrance to the classroom, the stuff that they're going to throw once the gunman enters, knowing that that's not going to stop him, but it may delay him. It may create a few more seconds for some of those kids in that classroom to get out. I was talking to somebody from Galveston, and we were remembering Santa Fe. We're almost at 1 year to the day. It was the 18th of May of 2018. And one of the most chilling things I've ever heard was after that shooting, in the immediate aftermath, there's a reporter, and they've got a microphone in the face of this student. And they ask her, were you shocked? Were you surprised a gunman came into your school and started to shoot your fellow students? And she said, no, I expected that was going to happen sooner or later. And so we talk about the solution to that challenge in that same conversation. That if we had universal background checks in every community in America, we closed every loophole, from the boyfriend loophole to the Charleston loophole to the online gun selling loophole, to ensure that everyone who purchases a firearm in this country goes through a background check. We will see for this country what we've been able to see in those states that have adopted universal background checks, and near 50% reduction in gun violence. If we add to that a ban on assault weapons and weapons of war that were designed to be sold to the United States military, because they do a great job of killing people very effectively, very efficiently, in very great numbers, we can ensure that fewer of them show up in our schools, in our churches, in our synagogues, and take the lives of those in our lives. And what I loved about that conversation, which was that as urgent as this challenge is, that young person, and very indicative of her generation, is not going to wait for the rest of us to decide this issue. She's leading the walkout from her school. She skipped school that day to confront me in town hall. She brings the urgency to this issue that has defined every significant change that we've seen in this country. Those great civil rights marchers, the folks in Greensboro, North Carolina, who integrated that lunch counter, the freedom riders in the Deep South, those who walked with John Lewis across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, so often the very youngest, who maybe do not know better, that you shouldn't wait your turn, that our politics doesn't work like this. They kind of force the hand of those who hold the positions of power and trust to do the right thing. We were in Iowa before that. It was our third visit to that state. And going into Iowa, I had reached out to an administrator of a rural hospital in Hamburg, Iowa. That community just got hammered by flooding that they had never seen before in the history of the state of Iowa. There was 4 times the runoff into the Missouri River Basin this year, the greatest level of runoff since they've been keeping records. Towns that had never flooded were underwater to a home, something that you're very familiar with here in Houston. And that hospital administrator is trying to run the hospital on generators because the electricity grid is not back up. But he's also telling me that it's a day-to-day struggle, even before the flood hit, to keep the doors open. The Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rates, the fact that the Affordable Care Act and the healthcare system in this country is not working for him or those rural residents that he's trying to serve, much like 400 other rural hospitals across the country that are on the verge of shutting down. There have been 15 in the state of Texas in just the last 10 years. And I thought about all the things that were coming to a head in Hamburg, Iowa. Climate change, that flooding was matched by flooding that we saw on the other side of Iowa. The Mississippi in Davenport had the highest level of flooding since we've been keeping records on the Mississippi. And I shared with all of them what you've experienced here in Houston. 58 inches of rain fell from the sky in a single storm, the landfall record for as long as we've been keeping them, and your third 500-year flood in almost as many years. Those floods, the fires, the after effects we witnessed in the Central Valley of California, the greatest we've seen in that state, the droughts not too far from Paducah that we heard firsthand from those farmers, this is all caused by us. Not by God, not by Mother Nature. Our emissions, our excesses, our inaction in the face of the facts and the truth and the science has led us to this moment, to what that hospital administrator is seeing in his community of Hamburg. And at the same time, this, the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet, that does not want for resources, has yet to find the political will, not just to confront climate change, but to make sure that he can afford to take care of his fellow citizens and provide them the care that will ensure that they're well enough to live to their full potential, to be able to go to school or work a job or create a business or farm their land. And he's talking about what we could do as a country to meet these challenges. We were in Las Vegas, Nevada, and an issue came up that we heard a lot of in El Paso, certainly in the border communities like El Paso, but across Texas. This 12-year-old girl stands up at another one of these house parties, and she says, I was born in this country, I'm a U.S. citizen, but I'm going to be moving to Mexico with my parents, both of whom are being deported right now. And would love to know, Beto, what you're going to do about this. And to be confronted by a 12-year-old child who has the most acutely tuned BS meter that has been invented. She wants to know that there's a way for her parents who'd already contributed so much to the success of Las Vegas and to this country to be able to stay here. She wants to reveal her genius over the course of her life, the things that she's going to learn, the things that she's going to do, the jobs that she's going to create, the poetry that she's going to write here in the United States, not back in Mexico. And so we talked about rewriting our immigration laws so that they reflect our values, so that her parents can stay here, so that young people, dreamers like her, are freed forever from any fear of being deported back to a country they do not know, because we've decided to make them U.S. citizens in this, their true home country. And it is incredibly energizing to be with these people who are so fiercely interested in this moment. And they know that it counts for more than any moment in this country's great history, going all the way back to July 16th in Exeter, New Hampshire. I mean, all of this is on the line right now. If it's climate, the greatest existential challenge we faced, if it's healthcare, if it's an economy that works too well for too few and not at all for too many, if it's immigration and this fear of deportation, if it's gun violence, or if it's the fact that the world's greatest democracy is under its greatest pressure test ever. Threats from without, a foreign government, and threats from within, a foreign government invited to participate in our elections by a candidate who's not the president of the United States. So people feel this, and they're coming out, and they're engaging with us. And I just want to tell you from the road, it is powerful, it is beautiful, it leaves me even more optimistic than I was at the start of this. And our challenge in this race, and I know it's on the minds of some of you here, is given that there are now, as of today, 22 candidates. One of the greatest fields of candidates ever assembled by either party in the entire history of this country. How do we stand out and distinguish ourselves and define the future of this country through the campaign that we are running? And I wanted to give you a couple of thoughts on that. I think part of it is where we are right now. So this country is as divided, as polarized as it has ever been. And yet here we stand in the most diverse city in the entire United States of America. Not too unlike El Paso, Texas, where a quarter of those with whom we live were born somewhere else, chose us, started anew as strangers in a strange land to do better for themselves and their kids, but also because they were called to do better for all of us. And they have. El Paso, Texas, one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America today. Not and so I think in Texas, in Houston, in El Paso, in Paducah, we don't tolerate, we don't just respect our differences, we fully embrace them. We understand it's the very foundation of our strength, of our success, and yes, our safety and our security. Being a small business owner there, creating high wage, high skill, high tech jobs in one of the poorest urban counties in the United States of America, understanding that we were awash in talent, but we just needed a means to be able to express ourselves. Serving on the El Paso City Council for 6 years, elected not as a Republican nor as a Democrat, in a nonpartisan position where we just had to deliver for those who put us into that position of public trust. And we did every single year, balancing budgets, but also taking on the tough fights. In 2009, extending health care benefits to the same-sex partners of El Paso City employees. And then some of you may know this, we ran a race in 2012 against the incumbent and against the odds to be elected to the United States Congress, to serve my constituents there, 750,000 strong, for 6 years, every single day of that in the minority, which meant that if I was going to get anything of any significance accomplished, I had to find the common ground with my Republican colleagues. And we did. We expanded mental health care access for veterans. We protected public lands in Texas at a time that President Trump was diminishing the size of public lands across the country. We were able to get that into the National Defense Authorization Act, get a Republican-controlled Congress to include it not just in the House, but the Senate version, and have it signed by the one man with whom I agree on almost nothing. But we have found enough common ground there to get that done. Now, the secret is that he does not know that that was in the bill that he signed. Nobody tell him. And then lastly, this race that we all ran in each of the 254 counties of Texas. Going to places that had not been visited by a Democrat, in some cases by a Republican contending statewide in forever. I told some of you the story of going to Archer City and going into Mern's Cafe and being with the 12, or if you count those eating breakfast, the 20 people who were there, and talking about what was on their minds. And before walking in, being told by somebody that the last Senate candidate from either party to show up in that community was Congressman Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1948. It had been 70 years because there are some places so red that Democrats fear to tread. And when they don't show up, Republicans don't have to either, because they have no natural competition in November. Those folks have no meaningful representation. But when we decided to show up, they suddenly did. And here's the result. Though we did not win, we all got to be part of something absolutely transformational for this state and our democracy. Thanks to everyone here, Lizzie Panel Fletcher, helping to replace their Republican predecessors and to flip the House of Representatives to move forward on some meaningful change for this country. We changed the composition, not enough, but in the right direction, of our state legislature that has a responsibility for redistricting in this state. a little bit closer to what we need to do in 2020. And then here in Houston, Texas, the best story of all, 17 African American women elected. At the end of the day, we won more votes than any Democrat has ever won in the history of the state of Texas. We won independence for the first time in decades. And 500,000 of our fellow Texans who happen to be Republicans, who voted for Greg Abbott on the ballot, also voted for us. Without us having to trim our sails or compromise on the courage of our convictions, we were able to talk about the things that matter to everyone and bring everyone into the solutions to these challenges, and built a movement comprised of Democrats, yes, of independents, of Republicans, and especially of young people. Young voter turnout of 500% over the last midterm election. I hope that this helps make the case that at a time that this country is so divided, so polarized, at a moment that our democracy is so badly damaged, we were able to show a way to come together despite the differences of party or geography or anything else. We were able to do it without political action committees or corporations or special interests, just human beings, our fellow Texans, making it possible. And I believe that at this moment, it is critically important to defeat Donald Trump, but it is even more important to bring this country together around the challenges that we face. You have shown me, and I hope the rest of the country, the path to do this. It's positive, it's about unifying all of us, and it's about being defined by our ambitions and the work and the service and the sacrifice we're willing to bring to bear in order to achieve them. It is an honor to run this race with you and to be with you once again. Thank you so much.